Hi everyone, it's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri YouTube series. We're in 1911, finishing up a letter today. I'm a little slovenly, I realize, so apologies for that. I wanted to get this in while I had the chance. It's just been really busy and chaotic here lately, so my apologies also for not having kept to the usual schedule. I should have done this 1 or 2 days ago, especially since it's the second half of a letter, the final half of a letter. So the letter that Dmitri wrote while staying in Tsarskoye Selo at the Alexander Palace for the Easter holiday, for Pascha. On the 6th of April 1911, he was writing this, which was his sister's birthday. So he knew she wasn't going to get it on time. But he sent her Easter greetings, and he sent her birthday wishes. It was both. He was responding to both of those things. Her birthday and Pascha were not on the same day, but they were quite close to each other. Well, that year, Pascha, of course, is a movable date. Okay, so that's pretty much all the recap we need, and let's finish this one off. Here we go. I have moved to Tsarskoye for the holiday and will stay here until April 17th. Darling, if at all possible, try to remember to congratulate the 2nd Rifle Battalion on their feast day, 17th April. They are all so terribly devoted to you, and it would make a huge impression. Can you imagine, Maria? I have only 2 more weeks of studying, and then I'll be done, completely finished. My God, how nice it is to know that. Around the 1st of May, I'll be inducted into the Horse Guards Regiment and moved to Krasnaya, and my Vater will live in Petersburg. He! Exclamation point. And so, for now, I wrap you in my arms, I wrap the air in my arms, and, pardon the expression, his father. Ton frère adoré et remarquable Dmitri. Your Dmitri. I'm making a face there because I hate the way French sounds when I try to pronounce it. So, interesting things here. What I have translated as darling is Dmitri uses dushechka. So, yeah, darling is one of, you could say, dearest, or you could say, yeah, just about anything along those lines. But there's a more frequent word he uses, milaya, or is that the word? That I translate as dear. And so for this one, I chose darling. All right, not important. So Dmitri's battalion, the 2nd Guards Rifle Battalion, and he had been their honorary commander since he was a boy of 13. And Nicholas gave him that post because, as sort of, to help him, to solace him and help him recover from the trauma of Grand Duke Sergei's death. So it followed closely upon that event. It ruffled some feathers among the other Grand Dukes because they considered it such a mark of favor for a 13-year-old especially, and there was some jealousy. But anyway, I guess they got over it. But, it surprised me to learn that Maria was important to the 2nd Rifle Battalion. They're so terribly devoted to you, Dmitri says. So apparently she would maybe join him on the feast day of the battalion every year before she went off and got married. Well, no, that can't be the case because I have his diary from the year before she got married. But, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, maybe she sent them photos of herself and wrote letters or something like that. Um, and Dmitri is kind of, the little parent sometimes. He is the one that reminds Maria that, you need to remember such and such, or you need to do such and such, or would it be impossible for you to contribute some money to this person's pension, or things like that. He always, even as a little guy, he always had that trait of sort of being, the little, trying to be the little adult. In some ways, he was very immature, but in other ways, he had that kind of sense that if he did not take things in hand, then things would go awry. So what next? Well, the end of school. That's the big thing here, right? The Nicholas Cavalry School, not academy. An academy would be where men went who were already officers, like the General Staff Academy, not when they were getting their initial education. So the Nicholas Cavalry School, Dmitri, he started there, I think it was a 2-year course. Yeah, maybe less than 2 years, but he did well. And he would have gotten, they had gold medals and silver medals for, the top people in the classes, and he would have gotten a silver medal, but he did not complete a literature course. So that was, that was why he didn't get a silver medal, but otherwise he must have done quite well. And it's funny because he was a big reader. He liked literature. He would reference here and there Tolstoy. I don't think he ever talks about Dostoevsky, but other Russian writers. So maybe he was just too busy. I don't know. And those of you who have watched the videos that center on his diaries from 1906, 1907 know that he was good about doing his homework. He didn't have to be. He didn't have to have anybody standing there looking over his shoulder. I used to have to do that all the time with my niece, not so much with my nephew. And I don't know what kind of student Maria was, but the impression I get from the 1906, 1907 diaries is that Dmitri was pretty conscientious about his schoolwork, although there were plenty of times when he would write that he was doing something, he was rushing to do something at the last minute. Okay, what next? No, I'm missing something here. It's very interesting that he says that once he's inducted into the Horse Guards, he will move to Krasnaya. So when he says move, it's unclear what he means, other than the fact that he will be living there. So was that where the regiment was based? I thought it was in Petersburg. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. I mean, Krasnaya, we talked about it before because Dmitri has written about it before, quite a lot in 1910, and that was where the Guards in St. Petersburg Military District had their summer maneuvers every year. And I thought that was really, I never thought about the Horse Guards actually being based there and having their barracks and their officers housing there. I think one could probably commute. I don't get any sense that Dmitri, had bought or rented a house there, but maybe, I don't know. As I said, I'll have to look into that. And then after saying that he was going to move to Krasnaya, he says this very strange comment, and my Vater will live in Petersburg. So Vater, German, he spells it V-A-T-E-R. Instead of, it would be pronounced in German with an F sound instead of a V sound. Maybe it's supposed to be Swedish. I don't know how you say or spell father in Swedish, but It's definitely not Russian or English. And who is this father who will be living in Petersburg? And what's funny about that, because he follows that up with literally spelling out he, and he's laughing with an exclamation point. So is father maybe Georgy Mikhailovich? Will he be staying behind, the famous GM who was with Dmitri from the time he was 10 years old? Would he be staying behind in Petersburg while Dmitri went off and sowed his wild oats in Krasnaya with all the officers and the kind of people officers attract, or soldiers or what have you? I don't know. But interesting to think about, although one can't come up with an answer. And then this final bit, I wrap you in my arms, I wrap the air in my arms, so Leonard, the baby, and pardon the expression, his father. So the pardon the expression. Yeah, maybe you remember back when Maria was pregnant, and Dmitri would sort of refer to that obliquely as an interesting condition, and I think that was, I think it was actually not considered polite to say pregnant back then. And, maybe what he's getting at here is that if he instead of saying Wilhelm, he refers to his brother-in-law as the baby's father, maybe that's sort of a little transgressive, because in order for Wilhelm to be the father, it would mean that he had to have had sex with Maria, and of course, obviously he did, and it wasn't any secret to anybody. But every once in a while, Dmitri had a little bit of a prim side. Every once in a while, oddly enough, human beings are like that. You can be a person who's chasing women, and also a person who once in a while is a little prim. But that's just my interpretation. And then it's quite funny the way why he suddenly switches to French, I don't know. He didn't do that very often, actually. But your brother, your adored and remarkable brother. And that seems to go right back to this letter of 1910 that we did before the 1911 letter, where Dmitri was describing himself to Maria, trying to make her laugh, but also in a kind of serious way, as someone brilliant, but also stupid, and so remarkable. Yeah, that's kind of one of those jokes where you laugh at yourself by saying I'm remarkable, but there's also a part of you that thinks, well, I am, aren't I? Okay, so anyway, what do we have next time? Well, that's interesting. I'm rather inclined to go to some of Dmitri's extra diary writings, that he wrote in a parallel volume, not in one of his diary volumes, where he's talking about spiritual things. I find that interesting. I don't know if you will, but we're at a point to go in some other direction, maybe continue on to another 1911 letter, and I just haven't made my mind up. I'm always open to feedback and comments, and if you have preferences. And thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.